Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is Mason Mendoza, part of the creative onslaught over at Critical Comics. They put out so many comic books, and we are here to talk about those today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for the intro, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I always like to ask everyone, especially creators that kind of write their own books and kind of are working as the publishers of their own books, where does this journey start? Because that's not something you just decide one day to get into. Usually for most of us, it started early on.
Oh, yeah. So, I've been doing this, I think we started around 2011. But really, it goes back to like the days when I was playing with Legos and watching creative cartoons on like Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. I also play D&D regularly, so storytelling's kind of, world building, character development. That's just stuff that's really fun for me. And then I get to merge that with art in comic books and make like a really creative hands-on experience. So I guess we started taking it really seriously in 2017 when Chris and I co-founded Critical Entertainment. We came out with Zombie Zero first, and it was just kind of the two of us. Like, we lived together at one point, so we would always talk story when we were living together for that time. So it's been a long time. I couldn't necessarily put a pin on where it started. Being creative is just kind of part of life for me.
Yeah. Now, is it easier since you guys started in 2017? And what I've seen from everyone I interviewed, COVID might have been the best thing ever for indie comic creators.
So yes and no. COVID actually, we took a big hit during COVID because we were on this real uprise. Zombie Zero, for instance, had just gotten optioned. And then like the entertainment industry kind of came to a screeching halt. So we had to rethink a lot of our stuff. It did give me time to write like Lifeboat and Life is an Open Door. But yeah, COVID actually kind of was a bit of a setback in some ways. In other ways, it kind of cleared the way for our company to step in when other major publishers kind of stepped out. So it was definitely a balance. And there's a lot of like woo-way us adapting to this completely new situation. A good example is we used to go to the Emerald City Comic-Con in Seattle, and that's like a blast, and I loved driving up there and everything. But after COVID, it was kind of like, okay, maybe we should reel it back. So now we're back to just Southern California and planning to spread out again. And then the movie was, delayed now like a couple years, but we do plan to film next year. They've got a director. We've got a screen play written by Kevin Lewis and Michael Bondi's. Kevin Lewis is also directing. He did Willy's Wonderland, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
In Nick Cage. So that's where Zombie Zero is going. So like we're starting to get our feet back in the water here.
Yeah. Now, was writing always like a strong suit for you? Or is it something you found kind of later on, or it just got more fine-tuned as you kind of grew into it?
So for me, writing is just fun. Like writing a comic book, I just enjoy doing it, every element of it. And I've always loved like hand-drawn artwork, and being able to also kind of write the art direction is really nice in comics. And I would really like to write. I've written a screenplay now for Lifeboat, and that was a lot of fun too. But the cool thing about writing comics specifically is it's really feasible, and it's like a really straightforward way for me to tell stories that are really visual and cinematic. And I don't need like millions of dollars of camera equipment or CGI or actors to make them. I just need like a couple incredibly skilled artists like Leandro Rizzo, who did Lifeboat. Alonzo Molina did Life is an Open Door, The Quarrel, and Deep Space Top Off for me, and I'm going to throw another one at him soon. And then my letterer, Catherine S. Renta, they just take the words that I type in the script and they bring these stories to life. So Yeah. So like writing for me, I don't know. I've been doing it since I was a kid. I was one of those kids in like elementary school writing poetry and stuff. I feel like my mom is really encouraging with that. So
You were well trained. And it's funny you say that because comics is obviously feasible. Who was it? Jason Fabic, when we had him on the show when he was making Rook for Ghost Machine, he said, you know, like if someone makes a show, great, but he's like, I want Netflix to feel hurt that they have to put $200 million into every episode just because of the way I draw it. 'Cause he's like, I can, like, there's no limit. You know, if Jeff writes me this script, I can do whatever. I can essentially do whatever I want, and I can make like. I'm not bound by, oh well, you invented a metal that doesn't actually exist, so we can't put that into the episode or movie. There are no limits.
Right. And that's kind of the other thing about writing too is you're only a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So if you find like the other group members who just can absolutely kick ass and elevate it even further, like even if you're a great writer, you won't do that unless you find somebody who can see your vision and can take it away too. And that interaction is also just like an awesome experience for me. It's fun. Like I like creating,
Yeah.
so and with
Now,
others.
how did you meet Chris, who is your other partner who's written a lot of these books? How did you guys find each other?
So we went to college together. It's kind of a funny story, actually. We met at a frat party. So one of the dudes, he knew that Chris played D&D, and he knew that I played D&D, and we're like the two nerds at the frat party. And so he was like, "Hey, you guys talk to each other."
Perfect.
So we paired up, and he was the whiz, and I played a bard, and I don't know, we just kind of like got to know each other after that. We started going to college parties together, and doing road trips and stuff like that, and it was just part of the friend group. And then we had a lot of cinema and television arts majors
Okay.
that would all collect at our apartment, and so we'd watch things like they introduced me to Stanley Kubrick and all those the greats. Chris had us watching like Kurosawa and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I was a philosophy major, so on the other side of things, I could say like, oh, you guys should read The Watchmen. You might really like The Watchmen because it's like really deeply philosophical, and it's kind of like these movies. And then I think The Watchmen came out when we were in college, so or like right before maybe. So we took that apart, and it was kind of like what we did for fun.
Yeah.
Now we're like 20 years later still homies. So
yeah, I mean that's always good. You always hate to hear these stories like Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld, how like they came together and now like they're friends, but you know that there was time. I think everyone likes a story where like two friends came together and built something that's still going.
oh yeah. And Chris and I, we have our differences. Like, don't get me wrong. Like,
Oh,
we
for
bump
sure.
heads all the time. We're co-writing a book, and so I don't know if you've ever co-written with someone, but there's like a
No.
lot of push and pull in that. Yeah. So, but like in the end of the day, he's my rock, I'm his rock. We're like making this thing happen. We've come a long way, dude. Like it was just the two of us at a little booth in Long Beach in 2011 handing out free ash cans of Zombie Zero. And now it's like optioned to be made into something. And we're just state school dudes who made this happen. So
Yeah. Now, was it easy when you guys came together? Obviously, you had a lot of points to make for storytelling. It was obviously in both of your guys' hands. D&D, I think, is a perfect kind of jumpstart to really show you like how to make something from scratch. But now now you have these stories, but then like how easy was it to actually find an artist that could actually translate that?
that was like lightning struck 3 times, man. It was extremely difficult. We had, artists who came and went with some of our earlier short stories. Chris has a couple of short stories that we never published. I have a story that we never published. We definitely, found people who would come onto a project, go halfway, and then give up, and you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
But once you get that first artist that really sticks with you, you start to recognize serious artists, and you start to find people who can make that commitment and can actually follow through on it. And that's what we found in Leandro in the beginning with Zombie Zero. He took it, he took Zombie Zero all the way. So, and then he was actually the first artist that I found. I was looking for other artists, and I found a couple here or there, but nothing really stuck. And so I just went to Leandro and I was like, will you help me write this short story, or will you help me make this short story? And he did. And I'm super proud of Lifeboat. You know, it's a really meaningful piece to me. Now we have Leandro working on the storyboards for our movie pitch deck for Lifeboat. So, you know, it's very hard to find an artist, but once you find someone who sticks with you, uh, it just kind of works. You know, you
Yeah.
find the pros. And then like Alonzo, for instance, you know, on the other side, he's done like, I want to say like 9 of our books. Like Alonzo is so consistent and he keeps coming back to us, and he's done work for other people as well, but he keeps coming back and sticking with us, and we just value him so much for that. Because like Leandro, Alonzo, Tad, they should be doing, you know, like Skybound stuff, or like they should be bigger than Critical, right? But we just love that they keep coming back and helping us get bigger and bigger. And then, you know, now we have bigger artists like Dustin Nguyen, who did
Yeah.
like Descender and stuff like that, right? He's doing like a lot of the Batman stuff now. Um, he's an incredible artist, and we have him doing a variant cover for the book that Chris and I wrote together. So so you kind of start to work with people who have been in the industry for longer and longer. And I don't want to say anybody's like better than anyone else, because it's
Yeah.
art and it's all subjective. But you start to find people who are consistent, and once you do, it attracts other people who are consistent, and they say, okay, Critical Entertainment's like starting to float. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Now, what was the point? And you almost all creators have it, where the first time it hits you that like this is kind of real. Like you weren't sure before, like you could only see steps and yeah, I rented a booth, but like it really hits you like like whoa, like this is happening.
that took a while for me, because I didn't, you know, I was working with Chris for a long time and doing the entrepreneurial thing of like starting the company and, you know, getting the bank account or whatever, doing, you know, the taxes and stuff.
Yeah.
And we like laid that foundation, and Chris was the writer on, you know, all of our books until I finally wrote Lifeboat in, I think, like 2021. So we're talking about a decade of me mostly being like, you know, support and going to every single Comic Con, sure, and talking about all Chris's books on the social media stuff, sure. But it really became real for me when I finally just like wrote a book
Yeah.
and sold that book, and then somebody read it, you know. And then there was also a point on our first pitch meeting for the feature film where we're sitting there with the producer and with my co-writer Bill Baber, who's a screenwriter and a film producer. And you know, Bill and I are pitching it to like a Singaporean production company. And they're like, the three of them, like 2 people from that production company and Bill, are talking about this story that I wrote in 12 pages as a comic book, and I had like nothing to say in the conversation, and they're talking about it, and it was like, oh shit, like other people are interested in this story, you know.
Yeah.
And that's when I really felt like, oh, I might be a writer, you know. I might have like done something that can, like, I spread an idea into other conversations. So that's when
Definitely.
it like really sunk in, and now I'm like writing every day, you know. I'm really hitting it. So
You're in the groove.
yeah.
And it's interesting with the movie because we've talked to a lot of people that were film majors that got really good at screenplay, but just either just didn't work out or it was hard to get their vision for a movie. They couldn't find someone, so they went to comics. You guys have a comic that's now going for screenplay. Was it difficult? Because obviously a screenplay, you have 400 pages and now you got to trim it down. Having 30 pages for a single issue or even an arc of 10 issues, you now kind of have to beef it up to make that movie. Was that challenging to some degree, or did you kind of actually know how you want to fill in the spaces in between?
It was definitely a bit of a creative challenge, because, you know, Lifeboat's 12 pages, and maybe it's a 20-page comic script, but a lot of those pages are going to be art direction, which you can't write in the script, that goes
Yeah.
and is turned into the screenplay, right? So that was something that Bill really taught me was, you know, you don't want to give the exact cinematography direction. You want
Yeah.
the director to take that and run away with it. So you just want to put the action and the dialogue and, you know, kind of simplify it. So then that cuts my 20-page script down to 6 pages or whatever.
Yep.
And now it's like, all right, and now we need to get this to 90 pages. Okay. However, on the other side of that is the way that I wrote Lifeboat was with the 3-act structure, and
Yeah.
it's very clear like where those act breaks are, and it's I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of Save the Cat, right?
Yeah.
So I've got all the beats laid out in just the most simplified, which was kind of challenging to write the comic book this way, but like in a really simplified 12-page book, I've got all those beats, so I just had to expand them, and it's like, okay, we're in Lifeboat really early on. um, the captain of basically an escape pod watches her mothership fade away into like particle decay and entropy, right? And so it was like, okay, now we get to spend the first act on the mothership and making the mothership important. And it's so easy to write like a cool generational ship idea.
Yeah.
And, I had all these ideas for it, like, well, I want to make it relatable. I want to make it familiar. This isn't like a utopian society. Somehow they've made it to the end of the universe, but still, like, there's societal problems that you see today. Like, human nature is permanent. So,
Yeah.
you can't escape it because you're human. If these are people, they're going to act like people. So yeah, it was kind of cool too. Also being able to elaborate on my own story, and then like I said, I love writing, so a lot of it just kind of flowed. And then Bill, he's a co-writer on it too, so like I leaned heavily on him in some of the more difficult parts. So yeah.
Definitely. One last question before we get into the whole reason we're here, is you've now been writing quite a bit. You got a lot of books. We've read quite a few of your books. What was the biggest takeaway after that first story going on to writing almost another 2 to 3 books that you kind of learned very quickly? Obviously, you had good examples watching Chris write his books, and
Yeah.
really helps to provide like a layout. But now it's taking that layout but putting yourself into it.
Right. I think that as far as like, you know, the hard skills go, I did learn like a lot more about paneling, and I
Yeah.
learned more about, being specific in my scripts and like color direction. I definitely learned like page turns are like the most important gift you have as a comic writer. That's where you really set the new scene or change the tone or put the surprise. Like every page turn needs to be important because you want to not teach your audience, but you want to show your audience there's a reason to keep flipping those pages. Like keep reading, keep reading. But the biggest takeaway that I like personally got as a writer was if you're gonna write like a really sad and heavy story, like also write something really happy as like a palate cleanser
Yeah.
that you can get away with, right? So off a Lifeboat, I wrote Life is an Open Door, which is just like an office escape fantasy about dogs who are like running away from their mean cat boss, and they go party in downtown Los Angeles. So I had like this. Now the way that I write is I usually try to write kind of 2 stories at the same time that are different tonally.
Yeah.
So that way I remember like put humor in your serious story and put a little serious moment in your humorous story. And it's okay to, you know, like mix the tones, but I don't just get entrenched in one thing or the next.
Yeah. No, that's a good thing. While we were reading your books, I wish I had known that because I read Space Dragon, then read Lifeboat, and I had to
Oh
read
man.
something else after it. I'm like, all right, this is getting really dark for a night. And it's funny the things that you've learned, because we are going to definitely talk about that because I have a lot to say about your books on that. But that brings us to why we're here. And this is a unique Kickstarter that I would say I feel like you guys are kind of the first ones to do more of this. And that is that most people will put a Kickstarter. It's usually volume 2 of whatever book they're promoting at the time. And then usually there'll be add-ons to get, a previous book or whatnot. You guys are launching a Kickstarter to actually like pretty much get everyone into your library to really showcase them what Critical has to offer.
Right. We want to just increase our outreach even more. To people who maybe don't have access to a local comic shop or
Yeah.
can't make it to a convention. We just want to grow our community of friends and fans. And the cool thing about the Kickstarter is we're doing like a signature series too of many of our existing titles, which are kind of rare because none of our artists are local and some aren't even in the US, right? Like Alonzo
Yeah.
and Leandro they're out of the country. So we're offering like that, and then some freebies that we can't bundle at our local comic shops, right? Um, so we're trying to reward existing fans with like bonus stuff, and then we're also just trying to spread the word about Critical like as wide as possible. We've got really affordable rewards starting as low as $5, because while like charitable lump sum from like a big spender with a big heart would be great, we're hoping to reach our goal through as many individual backers as possible. We just want that exposure, right? We just want to get known.
Definitely. Now with this Kickstarter, and what's interesting with your guys' books is you could kind of lump some of your books together where you have more of the dark serious, you have more of the action adventure, and then we have the short story one-off kind of humorous. How did you go about deciding like how many tiers to make? Because obviously you don't want someone scrolling through a Kickstarter page either and being like, oh my God, they're offering 80 tiers. How do I even pick one? You want to kind of make it obviously concise so it's easy to pick and be like, all right, well, $30, 5 books, let's go. Or did you have like a
This is also our first Kickstarter.
okay.
So Chris and I are kind of like testing the waters, and we actually do have a lot of those little like $5 for this book, $5 for this book, $5 for this book, and some stickers, right? So I think you'll probably see a majority of that actually once we launch and go live. Because while I like the bundle idea,
Yeah.
and a lot of people just bundle on our website too. The cool thing about Kickstarter is we also wanted to make sure we had availability for everybody. So it is going to be difficult, even though our goal is only, I think, like $3,000. It is going to be difficult to hit that with so many small transactions. But like, really, the idea is get that reach,
Yeah,
just
sure.
something small for everybody. But if somebody wants to come in and swipe, I think we've got a couple of big bulk bundles. Like, yeah, hell yeah, do it. That's great. We love the support. Like, we can't say how much we appreciate the support. But yeah, what really would help us is if somebody goes to the Kickstarter and gets a $5 thing and then just tells their buddy like, hey, did you read this book? There's a Kickstarter for $5. Like, check this out. We're getting that word of mouth.
Yeah. And then the nice thing about your Kickstarter, that is a lot different too from other Kickstarters, is usually you're investing in a Kickstarter that's not really done. I
Right,
know I've
products.
invested. Yeah, I've invested in a Kickstarter and waited, I think, a maximum 2.5 years. I waited.
Ooh, did it come
Uh,
through though after the two and a
it
half
did.
years?
I
Good.
forgot I ordered it. I didn't know what it
Yeah.
was. I said I've
Yeah.
never purchased this. So that is really nice that people know that when they go through your Kickstarter, um, all your books are technically ready to go. And as soon as the campaign ends, it's pretty much an immediate shipping at that point, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, we're for the majority of stuff, it's ready to go. And we have quite a bit to offer, right? The fact that we've waited so long to do a Kickstarter means we have like a backlog of a bunch of books. So we do have a lot of different stories to offer. We do though, we will also offer some pre-orders, so there will be some things that I'm sure people might order and not get until next year. Like I think we have the Planetary Expansion bundle, which is going to be Planetary Expansion 1 through 8. You'll get 1 through 4 up front, and then 5 through 8 will come once we publish those throughout the next year, and I think even a little bit into 2026. So
Definitely.
so it'll kind of be almost like a pull box for some
Yeah.
people, right? Like you put the order in now and then you get the what's available, and then the rest comes along with that. But yes, like you said earlier, we do actually have some completed work. Like
Yeah.
we're putting comics in your hands with this Kickstarter. It's not an empty promise. It's not a help us finish this project. It's get some stuff now, and then of course you are helping us build a future and continuing to support these projects, and you'll be rewarded for that too.
Of course. Now let's talk about some of the titles that are included. Lifeboat, as we talked about, which is really interesting. Because you said you are working on another boat or another book for it, or is that what was a one shot?
Lifeboat's a one shot, right?
I mean, I would like a sequel.
Yeah. So I'll tell you that the feature film script gives you a clearer ending, I guess, a less ambiguous ending, and a real, a real fleshed out story. I think what's important about, well, let me give my elevator pitch for Lifeboat, right? For those people that don't even know what the hell I'm talking about, it's like a high sci-fi about the end of the universe from the perspective of the pilot of a small escape spacecraft. So she's witnessing the heat death of her society's mothership in like slow motion, and it's really heavy for 12 pages. But a reviewer on the League of Comic Geeks said it was an existential crisis told in one breath. So big shout out to
Yeah.
them. So coming from that perspective, when I was writing Lifeboat, it was more to just kind of express what I think people are going through and what, maybe I might have gone through with like a, personal loss situation, right?
Yeah.
So, it's kind of a heavy hitter. But as we turn it into a feature film, it's going to be more read a little bit more like a movie. It won't be just the internal monologue. So yeah, that being said, no, there will not be a sequel to the Lifeboat comic strip unless we make it an entire graphic novel, which at that point we would probably do it. Yeah, it's the comic based on the movie, based on the comic.
I mean, that'd be awesome. Because there are a lot of questions, especially in those first few panels. You guys introduce a lot of cutting edge technology, but we really don't get to see it at its finest because everything's dying.
Right. So
Oh yeah, I would.
that was inspired a lot by, because I actually wrote that at Comic-Con in I think like 2021. Or maybe 2020, or I guess we didn't have a Comic-Con in 2020. So yeah, it must have been 21. Uh, but yeah, I just went back to the hotel and I wrote it after watching a panel about low Earth orbit hotels and like what it takes to make like a hot air balloon hotel in the upper stratosphere or whatever, right? And then I also went to a NASA panel where they were talking about how to build a spaceship because I wanted to introduce that hard sci-fi like early on so that people weren't really asking like, well, how do people survive at the end of the universe? Like what,
Yeah,
how like humanity probably, knock on wood, we might not make it to the very end of the universe
more than
when like
likely.
electrons are spinning off of particles and like everything's really fading, right? But I wanted to, present an idea that's like, no, well, what if we did? Okay, here's what we would use. We would have like the right avionics system to do this, and we would have like, life support and solar cells and all sorts of, fun ways to harness energy from black holes because that's all the only thing existent in the universe at that point. So yeah, I did want to like dig deep into the hard sci-fi. I was like scouring the internet looking for like the deadline date, like when will the universe really go
Yeah,
into a heat death? So like on the back of the book, I think I said something silly like it's like, year 1.7 to the 106th power of 10, which is like 10 with 106 zeros, right? Moments before particle decay unwinds the atomic fabric of space-time as we know it. I'm just trying to like get that drama, like this
yeah.
is the end of the universe, but we survived because we're the human race and we're awesome. And how did we do it with regular people, Um, but yeah, a lot of the science in it is all based on theory. I read A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. I don't know if you are
I
familiar with that
have
book.
quite a few copies of it.
I loved it. I loved it. So that was a huge inspiration for it too. So yeah, I did try to stay true to the sci-fi, but I'm sure that people could poke holes in it, like because it is quite the stretch.
Yeah. Well, what's really nice about your books is there's nothing like a good sci-fi story into space, which I don't know if that it just happened one day. If you guys look back and like, wow, we have a lot of space stories. I did enjoy them all. Space Dragon was again very sad ending. For
I
anyone that's reading
know.
it,
I know. I
that was very
know.
soul crushing.
That's
um,
the only thing.
Planetary expansion as well, because you can see still human society has evolved in that book. but now obviously the main goal of this book is we're looking upward and onward again to the future. The one thing that I really like, and I don't know if this was a choice by you guys or your artist, almost all your books, especially in the sci-fi and in Minions, is you have like an old school Art Deco style that works more for the stories. It reminds me a lot of EC comics. Not to say that Marvel and DC are bad, but it's very polished. It's very smooth. It looks, you could tell it's printed on a computer, like it's all printed. Where your guys has like that newspaper, like old kind of style to it. I don't know if that was a choice. It works really well, and I was really happy to see it. I think it adds the artistry more.
I love that about Planetary in particular. Really has that. And you can see like Alonso's growth as an artist from Space Dragon to Planetary, where he adds that kind of grainy texture and that grainy feel, and it totally feels like a retro sci-fi comic, right? And then Lifeboat, I feel like Leandro also took some of that really like pulpy kind of look and feel into the comic. I feel like it just wouldn't be a true sci-fi comic without something like that too. So I'm glad that you picked up on that. Like I can tell you it was not my artistic choice. But yeah, our artists do. They know what they're doing. They're killer.
Yeah, no, they nailed it. And it's funny because we mentioned the art and we mentioned pacing. If there's one thing I've ever said on the show more and more, I should probably get a t-shirt made that says it. Pacing is the biggest thing in comic books. You could have you could have Batman and a great story, but you pace it wrong, it's still going to be a bad Batman book, especially with page turns. Your guys' stories, especially on the one-shots, was pretty surprising because it felt pretty nailed for the most part, almost every page of really advancing the story, but just enough to get you to the next like chip before you get to the end. Was it difficult getting to a lot of that?
I think for Lifeboat in particular, because it's like this really grand story on such a minute scale. Like, yes, man, like pacing that story in 12 pages, I cut out a lot of ideas, right, that are going to come through in the feature film. Like, that was such a challenge. For something like Life is an Open Door, though, that's a little bit more artistic and fun. As long as you're familiar with like the 3-act structure, pacing was a little bit easier. You know, my big thing is like where the staples go in the book, that's the midpoint. If you don't have like a splash page or some kind of big midpoint, that flips the story on its head at that point, then maybe figure out where it is in your story and shift it there and clean up the sides, right? I don't want to say that I'm super formulaic, and like the book that I'm writing right now, I'm trying to go against the formula. I'm not thinking about the formula. I'm not thinking about the beat sheet. I'm just like letting it flow to see how it kind of ends up.
Yeah.
Because I do want to see. So like maybe the pacing will suck on this one. So because I do want to see like, okay, here's one where I really tried like The Quarrel or Deep Space Top Off. These other books that we have that are short stories that are out too. Like, I really tried to fit into like the movie Hollywood formula and the 3-act structure. And then I want to try one that's like a little bit more like, I don't know, just go with the flow to see like, was that a mistake? Was I limiting myself? Or is that actually what helped me make these books really, like, not like, I don't want to like toot my own horn, but like really put together,
Yeah.
It feels like those books to me really feel like a comic that I can put next to other comics in the shop and feel like, okay, yeah, this belongs here. Whereas like, some of my books that I used to write, it's like, this is fan fiction, or like, this is something kind of silly and it's not really polished. The ones that we've put out are like, yeah, this, I don't know why it fits in, and maybe that's a problem. Maybe I want, this next book to stand out a little bit more. We'll see.
Now, what's really interesting is Life is an Open Door is both the same as Lifeboat, but also vastly different. Did you have an easier time? I mean, anytime you have a talking Dalmatian who's just trying to make it through work and not get chewed out by their boss, like it's just it's one of those stories that I'm not saying you don't have to think about, but for the most part, you really don't, because the I would say comedy kind of to a degree writes itself depending on the subject you pick. And obviously animals, that's a great one into like a common day workplace, something we're all familiar with. Um, did that book get a little bit easier than Life? Because Lifeboat, you really have to think like, all right, I'm going from 0 to 100 right away. How am I going to ride this out? This, it's like, he clocks in at 9. He didn't get lunch today. He's trying to get out by 5. It's a little bit more easier kind of move on with.
Totally. And, dog puns and like animal puns and the crossover of like anthropomorphism and office genres and how we all have like these instincts that are repressed in the workplace. Like so much of it just wrote itself. Like there's a moment where I actually have them all, it's about like somebody leaves the door open and dogs bolt, right? So I was like, all right, here's the office dogs. Somebody leaves the door open and they all bolt. And there's a moment where like the first thing that I think the King Charles Spaniel does is he goes out and he just like pisses on a fire hydrant. And it's like, that was so easy to write. There's another dog who runs out. I think it's the Cocker Spaniel who runs out and just starts digging in like the island on the side of the road. Cause like, it's like, okay, this is when they're letting their instincts go free. Right.
Yeah.
And so I would say Life is an Open Door came to me a lot quicker than Lifeboat. Also because Life is an Open Door doesn't have any dialogue. It's
Yeah.
more like music. It's like you're reading this experience and you just kind of get to flow with Alonso's incredible watercolors. Whereas in Lifeboat, there's dialogue on every panel. Like every
Yeah.
single panel has either part of her internal monologue or something going on between the characters in the background. So I would say yes. As far as like ease of writing, Lifeboat was a little bit smoother for me. I mean, sorry, Life is an Open Door is a little smoother for me.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you said you're working on some new books. Are those going to be included in the Kickstarter as well, or is that like a pre-order?
So we've got some new Minion comics that are definitely. I think those are going to be pre-order, which means 1 through 4 will be available, and then 5 will be pre-order. I've also got The Quarrel, which I don't think we were able to get to you, but it's about a red-tailed hawk chasing an oriole through Central Park. That'll be available. And then I have a comic book called Deep Space Top Off. It's about an interstellar gas station attendant named Blorfus being robbed by the Brain Blaster gang. And it's really like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy meets like Kurt Vonnegut. And that's not going to be available in the Kickstarter because that will be in. I'm actually publishing that with Dual Animal, which is another indie publisher. Maybe we could get them on the podcast. They're super cool dudes, really fun dudes. Yeah. And they have an anthology that's going to be a sci-fi anthology, and they asked me to write a short for them. So that will be in theirs, and that's like the only one that I've ever made for somebody else. So this is like my first like non-self-published book, which is really exciting for me.
Definitely.
And then the one that I've been talking to you about right now, that I've kind of been like alluding to, it's about like a village kid using a stolen gigantic mechanical exosuit to rebel against an interplanetary force. So very Xenogears inspired, a little bit One Piece inspired, and it will not be in the Kickstarter because it's not complete yet, and it probably won't be complete this year. So I didn't want to put that one out just yet. Maybe in our next Kickstarter we'll start talking about that. But yeah, it's very very Gundam kind of Evangelion inspired.
Perfect.
Hell yeah.
Now, which was really funny, and I don't know if this is going to happen, is like as I said, you guys wrote a lot of books in space, different sectors of it, different vectors of space and whatnot. Is there a chance that you are going to start seeing some crossover, or you are going to start writing some of your books and you're like, well, let me include someone from Planetary Expansion, like let me see him go, because I mean space is infinite and small at the same time.
That's a great question. We have had a lot of talk about that.
Yeah.
Crossover stuff. I think Deep Space Top Off, there's definitely going to be some crossover stuff with the rest of the Dual Animal universe. Like that anthology has, I think, like 8 other books from 8 other awesome writers and a bunch of other awesome artists, right? So we're definitely going to kind of keep that one spicy as it goes on. I don't think that's just going to be a one shot from me. There will be more. But as far as like the critical entertainment universe, a lot of them are taking place at different times, right? Like Lifeboat's at the end of the universe. Um, Minion is like the not too distant future, right? Like we were thinking like
Yeah.
2149. And then Planetary Expansion is also kind of like 2149, but then you have the problem where Minion's a superhero book. You don't have superheroes in Planetary Expansion. Again, that's like a hard sci-fi. So I think the only place where we could really do some crossover would be if Planetary Expansion, if they like fly by Space Dragon, and they're kind of like, what the hell is that, right?
Yeah.
So I think we would like to give a little nod that way, and we've been nudging each other about that. But
For sure.
otherwise, the fact that we keep doing different genres and keep like really spreading things out kind of prevents us from doing a crossover that like makes sense. And that's a really important part for me in writing is like people aren't going to read this unless it somehow makes some kind of sense. So there's like competing interests there. Do I make sense or do I give the people what they want?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I was reading Planetary Expansion and I always wondered, like, as he gets to a new planet, or like they somehow, because I don't know how the story's going to unfold, if he got knocked out into space and like some guy was like holding a sign who said like the world's going to end in, and like included the back of the book like on a sign. He's like, yeah, the world's really going to end at that time. Or he says, are we going to really stop with the planet full of dogs? And I said, I was very curious. I'm like, man, there's so much wiggle room to do so much crossover and like just hints at like your whole comic universe, like just the little things.
Little taste. Yeah. I mean, the thing is like you don't even have to put the first Americans on Earth if you really want to get into the critical cinematic universe.
Yeah, I mean, and how crazy is that? Looking back at this Kickstarter and seeing like the bundles and like everything you guys have essentially made. I mean, the critical universe. You could make a sticker that says like, welcome to the critical. I mean, you have so much library, so much books that you have essentially made a comic universe. I don't know if that was kind of a goal or is just like you could look back now and be like, this is how far we've come and how much more we're still going to keep going.
Yeah, it really is. Like we're super proud of it, man. It's like I'm looking at the Kickstarter page right now on my other monitor here. Like that, the variety of genres that we've hit. It was our initial goal to kind of not write the same thing twice, and we really didn't. And something that we're trying to really get out there is our company. We want to write extraordinary heroes, and of course I botched it as soon as I was trying to make the pitch. Extraordinary heroes in unexpected places, right? So that says something about every single one of our books. We have a hero, like a real hero in some kind of circumstance that you just wouldn't expect. It's a little bit different. Even like with the office element with Life is an Open Door, it's like, yeah, this is the office, but at the same time it's in like an anthropomorphic world, so things are still very different. We're trying to stretch it so that people can kind of escape, right? People can kind of get away and they'll still have a hero who's going to be there for them, who's going to be reliable, who's going to take care of them and get them into a fun story.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
all right.
We're super stoked, man.
Oh, it's going to be great. So for everyone listening, and we're recording this now, but if you're listening to this right now, it should be in the morning on Friday. That is when everything is live, correct? Everything's live on Kickstarter September 30th.
August 30th. August 30th.
Yeah. So if you're listening to it, it should be August 30th. You should be listening to it now. How long is the Kickstarter?
I think we're going to do the 1 month Kickstarter.
Okay.
So the usual, just 30 or 31 days. We've heard, like I said, this is our first Kickstarter, so we've heard good and bad about doing 1 or 2 months. I think, we're just kind of rolling the dice on a 1 month. So, as soon as you hear this, log on, sign up.
Exactly. We were coming to you from the past into the future. So there's a lot of tiers, a lot of things to look at, a lot of chances to kind of get a broad tasting of what Critical has to offer. let's just say for some reason someone was to miss out on this Kickstarter, they just didn't have the funds currently, will there also be your store will still have stock?
Yep.
And
So
they're able to go to there.
we've got the online store at criticalentertainmentla.com. We've got an Instagram store. I think we're trying to put up a TikTok store even. We're even dipping our toes into TikTok. And so all of our stuff's going to be up on that. And then obviously, like, support your local comic shop. We are doing solicitations in Lunar and Diamond. So, you can go into pretty much any comic store and pre-order some of our books. Space Dragon, like we were talking about, Ryan, I hope you really like Space Dragon, man. That one's currently in Lunar with the final order cut off mid-September. We've got Planetary #1, another one that you liked a lot, currently in Lunar, final order cut off mid-September, and then Planetary 2 and Lifeboat will be solicited in Lunar for September.
Awesome.
But for instance, Zombie Zero, to go back to that one, that's like a full graphic novel. All that we have left is what's in stores right now and what's in our Kickstarter. So if you want that Zombie Zero book, we're not even offering it on our website anymore because we took that inventory and saved it for the Kickstarter. So if you want that that first edition copy, it's being made into a movie, Kickstarter is the way to go.
All right, everyone listening, if you are into zombies, this is the time. Click that link now. And for everyone that is interested into keeping updates of what Critical's up to and what you're working on currently, where are the best places to follow you?
Instagram is kind of our bread and butter, Critical Entertainment, or you can follow my personal one. It's just Mason Critical Entertainment. But if you follow our company account, that's where it's at. Instagram's where we put most of our info. And then our website, of course, we're always making updates to that. But as far as social media goes, we just hit 5,000 followers on Instagram. We're always looking for more. That's our best outreach. That's our best platform right now.
Awesome. Well, for everyone listening, you will be able to find all the links in the comments. Mason, thank you for coming on. We look forward to seeing what Critical has to offer. Everyone listening, so many great stories. Go on to the Kickstarter, invest. You won't be disappointed. Thank you for coming on and answering our questions, and hopefully we'll have you guys back as we keep putting more books out.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Everyone listening, hope you enjoyed. Have a good night.